Welcome back to the podcast. Gabe, Giannis, and I, we are rolling solo. We're diving right into it. I hope your day is going great. Today, we're about to kick it off talking about, am I too tough, Gabe? You wrote back and said, you just kind of put a question mark when we talked about the topics, but we're about to get into a great episode. Just want to remind you guys, if you haven't gone back and checked out all the other awesome episodes we've had some incredible guests on that really have shared a ton of amazing insight for Gabe and I. So make sure to go back, check out the previous episodes. We have a lot of really good ones, but let's dive right in here, Gabe. Where should we start?
Well, I want to know why you wrote down that you wanted to talk about if you're tough.
Oh,
am I too tough?
Am I too tough? So, okay, some context here. I never send context to Gabe ever. I just send him over stuff. And
always.
So the other day, I don't know if I told you this, Gabe. So the other day I was, someone asked me like, hey, are you tough on Caden, my son? I said, no, dude. I'm not tough on him at all. Like in my mind, honestly, I was like, I'm not tough on him. I'm super loving, super compassionate. I'm not tough on him. I could be way tougher. And the reason why this got brought up is that Caden and I were watching the Lance Armstrong documentary. It's on Netflix. And I like watching stuff like that with him just because I think it's more educational, more documentary type stuff. And so we watched the stuff on Michael Jordan, the stuff on, the one on Deion Sanders was absolutely incredible if you haven't seen it.
Coach Prime,
did you, the Coach Prime, but not like it was like back in 2019. Have you seen that?
I think so. I started watching it, but it's the one where he's like the coach at the smaller school, not Colorado, or no. Different.
So that's another documentary, which was great, right? But this one's just about him and how he played in 2 professional sports in the same day. Have you seen that one?
No, but I'll check it out because I love that stuff. Like The Last Dance, Michael Jordan, the Lance Armstrong stuff. I've watched so much Lance Armstrong stuff. His story is just fascinating. Think what you want about the guy, but I love watching that kind of stuff. So I'll check it out.
Dude, so on Deion Sanders, just real quick, I was so impressed by his videos. So I've seen his new stuff with Coach Prime and obviously I know who he is, right? But when I watched his documentary, I didn't realize that he played for the he played professional baseball. Yeah, you saw me guessing with the news. Yeah,
Atlanta Braves.
He was playing for, I think it was the Braves and the Falcons at the same time. He was playing professional Major League Baseball and the NFL at the same time. So he was so athletic that he wasn't just good enough to be pro, which is like the 1% of the 1%, but then he was good enough to be that good at 2 different sports and actually be a contributor to the team. And he played both ways in the NFL. I was so blown away by how good he could possibly be. I didn't really realize that. Did you know that? Did you know that he played both ways and then he was playing Major League Baseball and football?
I did, but I had no idea it was happening at the same time. But I mean, dude, to your point though, I think it's almost impossible for people to understand how crazy it is to play one professional sport, but to be able to play 2 and again, be a contributor in 2 is absolutely insane. And I think, but I wonder, let me ask you a question though. How much of that is just because I think that there's a lot of athletes today, not a lot, but there's definitely a handful of athletes today. There's a lot of people that say that LeBron James could suit up, maybe not now because he's a little bit older, but there was years where he could have suited up and played as a tight end in the NFL, no questions asked. And a lot of people have said that. So I wonder how much of it too is that now people just specialize so much that it's nothing and there's so much money involved that why risk your baseball career by playing football or your football career by playing baseball? And that's just the way it is. Because I do think that taking away nothing from the insane athleticism that is Deion Sanders, but I think that the best athletes, and this kind of ties into what we talk a lot about with kids and kids sports and doing different sports and what athleticism isn't being super specialized. I do think that there's a handful of athletes out there that you could potentially plug them into a different professional sport and they'd be better than you imagined. And there's a lot of players that end up picking one sport, but if you just peel back the layers, they were 3 sport athletes in a D1 school. They
For
did all
sure.
three and they did them well. They just decided to pick, okay, baseball is going to be my thing.
Yeah, and it brings up a good point about like high school. So a lot of, when I was in high school, this, it wasn't that long ago, but it was a long time ago. There was a lot of people that played multiple sports. Like I played multiple sports in high school. And then in college, typically you drop off to one. But nowadays, especially like at the higher level schools, a lot of kids, they're just going to play one sport.
There's less
And
of that, right?
it just brings up a lot of these points about like, diversifying the sports your kids get into. Obviously, we had a great conversation with Kelly Starrett the other day about what role kind of fitness plays in that. But, looking at like someone like a LeBron or a Deion Sanders is a really good example because I watched his documentary on him, and just to have the eye-hand coordination to be able to hit 100-mile-an-hour fastball. And then also, obviously, he was fast. So he stole bases. He did all these different things. But like, dude, he was just an athlete with amazing God-given talent and hard work ethic that allowed him to be successful at both. But the reason why it got like kind of popular was because the baseball team ended up going into the playoffs and ended up like getting further into the season. Otherwise, it wouldn't have conflicted with the NFL season. But because there was like a couple seasons in a row where the season went too far, right? Because they ended up getting into the playoffs and whatever. And that's why there was a conflict because because then it just started to become like this thing like, hey, what do you do? Are you playing baseball? Are you playing football? And one of the things that what he said, he's like, my wife, what do you say? He goes, my wife is football. My side something is baseball or something like that. I mean, he was just using an analogy like, hey, he's committed to football, but he still likes baseball. One other thing that he said was that he talked about full time. And he said that in one of the contracts he signed, it said that he will do baseball full time. And they didn't clarify what full time was. So for one person, you hear full time. This is a good analogy for life. You might think that means like that's all you're doing, right? Like, hey, what do you do for work? Oh, I work full time at Train Hard, NCFIT, etc. Whatever. To him, when he heard full time, what he meant is like, yeah, dude, like when I'm playing baseball, like I'm all in on baseball, but I could go do things outside of baseball. And it was just, he even had he even had this model where he would wear glasses and whatever. And he was prime when he played football and he was Deion when he played baseball. And he would never sign a baseball prime, but he would only sign prime and whatever when he was playing football. So he like totally segmented the two of them.
AMRAP mentality.
Bro, he AMRAP'd the hell out of that. So if you guys haven't seen it, I mean, it was just interesting because I didn't know enough about Deion Sanders. I only really caught up on his story watching him coach. And anyways, it was a good documentary to watch with Caden.
I love sports documentaries. I fucking love sports documentaries, dude.
So the one
they're the coolest. They're so
great.
much wrapped into stories. And what I love about baseball stories too is I love when they like tie in what's happening in the city at the time, and like the fan base and the emotion. And I'm sure this exists in other sports, but like
the Kelsey brothers documentary was incredible when it incorporated that with the city of Philadelphia.
Philadelphia, yeah. I mean, I hate Philadelphia sports fans, but yes, it was a good documentary, and yes, Jason Kelsey's great. But I just started watching actually, and it's crazy that it's taken me this long to watch. But there's a really good 4-part ESPN documentary, "Once Upon a Time in Queens," that documents the '86 Mets when they won the World Series. And I didn't know any of this though.
Of course. Is that the only World Series the Mets have ever won?
They've won 2, the 69 and 86, but the 86 story, and they like, weave this story together, but it's really cool because New York City is very well known that like in, the 80s, 70s, 80s, it was really bad. Like there was a lot of crime. The city itself was like bankrupt. And as the Mets got better, the city got better. So they tie in the fact that like, people in the city were like, kind of coming out of this like really dark time of New York City to the point where like this team that also like the Mets have always been, the redheaded stepchild of like the Yankees. Like the Yankees are the Yankees, and the Mets were kind of born as like the blue collar team that like, all the people that like work blue collar, like they were fans of that team. So to kind of like track the story of the city and the team, and then obviously it culminating where it did, and also the side story of the fact that that team was like a really young team, like bachelors, a lot of cocaine, a lot of drugs. Like they were playing good baseball and also like making the most of New York City life. is a really, really cool story. So anyway, since we're
I
talking sports documentaries, that's a good one.
I'll have to go watch that one with Caden. But we were watching the Lance Armstrong one. I didn't realize he started off in triathlons. Did you know that he started off in
Oh,
triathlon?
yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize that. And so like, his claim to fame, I guess, according to his documentary, was like in the beginning, there was like a really good triathlete. What was his name? Mark.
We could probably look it up, but yeah,
He was a really good triathlete, like one of the best ever. And he got in like at 15 or 16 years old and ended up like competing with this guy in like this major triathlon and kind of put him on the map. And then after that, he ended up getting into cycling and really dedicating himself there. It sounded like he was a great swimmer and runner too. But the reason why this got brought up is that they interviewed his stepdad. And so his stepdad actually had the last name Armstrong, right? And so he had taken his stepdad's name a couple of years. His mom had gotten pregnant pretty young, and the stepdad was being interviewed, and then they were kind of like splicing in interviews of Lance, and the stepdad was like, "Yeah, I was pretty tough on Lance. I used to kind of like basically like smack him with the paddle, and I used to like really make sure that he was working." He's like, I think that he is the way he is and he wants to win. Oh, what are they pulling up? Lance would not be the champion he is today without me because I drove him. Terry Armstrong said, I drove him like an animal. That's the only thing I feel bad about. Did I make him too much win at all costs? Question mark. So that was part of the documentary. And so the documentary was 30 for 30 film with Lance. And so anyways, the stepdad's talking and then Lance is kind of like expressing some resentment towards his stepdad. But where he went in is he said, what I think I did wrong is I didn't show him enough love and compassion or any of that. It was just all win at all costs. I'm gonna ride you. I'm gonna grind you. And then that was it. So that's what kind of sparked the conversation.
So going back to the question, are you too tough on Caden?
So I'm watching this and I'm like, dude, this guy sounds tough. I was like, I'm not hitting Caden with a bat or whatever. Like, I'm not that guy. So later on in the day, I can't remember who I was talking to. I was talking to somebody, and then I brought up to Caden. I was like, "Hey, Caden, you think I'm tough on you?" And I was expecting him to be like, "Nah, Dad." Like, no. He's like, "Yeah, you're really tough on me." And I was like, "Okay." Then I go up to Ashley. I was like, "Ashley, do you think I'm tough on Caden?" She goes, "Yeah, you're definitely tough on Caden." And I was like, "Huh." I really had to like take a breath for a second. I was like, I wasn't expecting that answer and afraid to come out so like clearly. And she's like, yeah, you're super loving. You're super compassionate to him, but like, don't get it wrong. Like you're also tough on him. Like you want him to be active. You want him to go clean up. You want him to go you want him to go do these things. Like you never let him just sit and watch TV. Like you're encouraging him to go do something at all costs. And, anyways, it's just something I was thinking about. So I definitely treat the kids a little bit differently, but how tough is too tough? Or is that okay, Gabe? Right? Is it okay? Is it okay to be the guy who's tough on the kid, wants them to work hard, but is also like the first one in their corner, giving them hugs and telling them how much they love them,
I mean, I think that that's the ideal balance, right? Like, I think that for a long, like there's the joke that the generation before us, I saw a meme the other day and it was like, like boomers always say how like handy they are, but like they never had like, the ability to tell their kids that they love them, And I think times have definitely changed. I think that there's a lot more of that, like, okay to like be emotional and say those things to your kids. But I think that there's a responsibility to quote unquote, and I don't know if that there's like certain connotations to the word tough that are negative. Cause I think that like, I think about like what Saban said, right? Like Saban has rules and they have to be followed. But he also came off as like a really loving, encouraging dad. Like he's helping his kids, excel at these sports, but it seems like he has boundaries and he like accepts zero reason why those boundaries would be crossed. Some can say that that's tough. Some can say that that's, good, but I would want to uphold boundaries. I just think it's like, what are the connotations to the word tough? Like, is that a bad thing? Like, should you be tough and that's good? Or is tough a negative?
Yeah, no, that's the thing, right? So I think it's a good talking point because most people would assume like tough is a bad thing. I actually think that at least for my son, like I need to be a little bit tough and create boundaries and have a little bit of discipline. And that's not meaning spanking and hitting. Like, dude, I'm just not that guy, right? I'm very, but I want him to work hard, and I won't be okay if I ask him to go do something he doesn't go do it. Like I just won't. Like if I'm like, hey, Caden, can you please go do whatever, and he doesn't do it, like I'm gonna call him out on it. And if that's me being tough, I don't know. Or is that just a lost art of where we're at? Like if you know what I mean, like I do a lot for him, and in return, I would you know want him to do stuff for us. Like if I ask him to go brush his teeth, he should just go do it. Like it shouldn't really be a question, you know? I don't know.
Yeah, it should be non-negotiable. And I think that there's a place, like one thing that I've heard in some podcasts and like read in books a lot is that like as parents, like we are the leaders, and like what we say goes, period. Like we should go back to a time where like there are times where it's like, it's because I said so. Like,
Yeah.
like my dad
Why?
used
Because
my,
I said so.
like,
Yeah.
dude, my parents used to tell me all the time, and my parents were like, I've talked about them a lot on this podcast, like the most loving, supportive, like I have nothing but good things to say. But I definitely got my fair share of like, while you're under this roof, this is how things are going to be done. And if you have a problem with that, you can leave. But like, that's just the way it's going to work. And that was it. Those were the rules, and they had to be followed. And there's like, it's funny because, and I don't know, I see this stuff all the time. My sister sends it to me a lot, but there's a lot of these like memes and jokes and like stereotypes where like, you know, like, oh, like white kids will say this to their parents and it's like completely acceptable. And like Hispanic kids will say it to their parents and get smacked upside the face. Like you never talk back to your parents at all. And I remember seeing like some of my friends who would like, you know, the way they responded to, like, if I ever like said that to my mom, dude, game over. And that's just how I was raised. And I think that the tough part now being a parent is like maybe finding the balance of like what is too much and what isn't. But I think the one thing that I appreciated having as I grew up was like a very, very, very like black and white understanding of like what is okay and what isn't. And I learned very quickly that there are, like, I don't raise my voice. You don't talk back. Like, even if you disagree, like, you just have to fucking eat it. Like, they're your parents. Like, it's their rules. They feed me. Like, they pay for my house. Like, who am I to be like, no, I'm not fucking doing that. And like,
Dude.
I rebelled in some ways for sure. I'm not saying that I was like, you know, the perfect kid growing up, but I think that it's important to grow up with that understanding of like, there are just like boundaries that shouldn't be crossed, and like there are rules, and there are also like consequences to actions. Like you can take actions, you can make the decision, but there are going to be consequences, period. And I think that that's an important thing that kids should grow up with.
Yeah, dude. I mean, when I reflect on it, I think the reason why I wanted to bring this up on the podcast, I know a lot of dads listen to this. And I think that if someone were to ask your child, are you tough? What would you want the answer to be? And it really got me thinking, like, what would I want them to say?
Well, what did Caden say? Did you ask Caden?
Yeah, I asked Caden. He said, I'm tough on him. But then if I ask Ava, she says, I'm not. So, so it brings up like this whole question about what would you want the answer to be? So, and obviously everything is within context, right? Always, like there's always context to be given here. Tough could be like, yeah, if your kid's like crying because it got brought up, well, you're probably way too harsh than you need to be. But what if they said no? Well, then are you lacking potentially creating guardrails and discipline today that may support them in the future? And I mean, I would say at this point, I think through reflection and through communication and through like this podcast and whatnot, like I feel like I'm getting a good balance of those two. But you know, they're definitely, yeah.
Dude, and this just reminded me, like, here's a takeaway that like has been imprinted into my brain that like, I love this podcast for this. Like one thing Chris Spieler said on the episode we had with him, that was like his biggest lesson learned is being okay apologizing when you mess up, like literally saying sorry. So I think that like that to me is like the perfect balance, because I know that there are going to be times where I think that I'm being like rightfully tough because like a boundary was crossed, and I might react in a way that I didn't want to react or like overdo it. And I think that the important piece then is recognizing that you went too far, recognizing that you messed up, and going and apologizing to your kid. Like, I am not going to be perfect. I know that. But I think that having the humility and making it a habit to it being okay for me to like, even though I am the parent, I am the leader, that means that doesn't mean that I can do no wrong. Like I know I'm going to fuck up, and being able to acknowledge that and have a conversation with my kid, no matter how young he is, and just kind of building that habit of like, hey man, like I'm really not proud of how I reacted there. I'm really sorry. Here's what you did. I messed up. Like, and then just like make that be a conversation that you have and move on. I
Yeah,
think was the fact that he shared that made me think a lot about it. And I think that that's a key piece to this balance that we're talking about, because sometimes you are going to go overboard,
for sure.
100%. Some of these things are
Especially with the boys,
emotional.
dude.
You're stressed, like whatever. They catch you at the wrong time and they do something that like maybe is a little deal that yes requires some course correcting, but you know you course correct a little too much. You should be able to revisit that later on and be like, dude, I am sorry.
Yeah, man. No, dude, it was just anyway. Yeah, I agree. I thought Chris shared some great insight. Make sure to go back and check out that episode. Um, but yeah, it just got me thinking, and I think it's a good thing for anyone listening to think through that lens, because you might be saying to yourself, you know what, man, I have not created enough boundaries, and I'm starting to see the behaviors of my child get worse and worse and worse. I'm like, dude, I don't want to be at a restaurant, my kids screaming and yelling and whatever. Like, I want and I want certain things for the kids, and that's important to start instilling in them at a young age.
All right, we're taking a quick break from the podcast to talk about what we have coming up on the Train Hard app in the month of July. So we're halfway through the year, which means that all the programs on the Train Hard app are entering a new training phase for the months of July, August, and September. So if you've been waiting, if you've been thinking about joining the Train Hard app, now is a great time to do it, because we're turning the page on the first half of the year and going into brand new focuses. Force is going to be focused on building some raw strength in the back squat, the deadlift, and the bench press. We're also going to be working on developing some strength in some body weight movements, the pull up, the dip. So just a lot of really great structured strength work, as well as the conditioning to make sure that you keep that engine going strong. So a lot of strength focus and force. So if you're trying to get strong this summer, absolutely something to check out. And then on the flex side, we have a brand new training phase as well. And that first 6-week cycle as part of that training phase is going to have a big focus on these giant sets. So 5 exercises per muscle group that you'll do in quick succession. So you'll do something like a bench press, then you'll do dumbbell bench press, then you'll go incline dumbbell bench press, then you'll do dips, and then you'll do push-ups back to back to back. The pump on these sessions is unreal. And I promise you, if you're trying to build muscle, if you've struggled to put on a little bit of weight, this is going to be the way to do it. This is going to be the way to improve your body composition. I'm super excited. And then the last thing is we now also have past cycles of Flex available as an ebook. So if you're just not trying to download another app, you don't want to be on a monthly subscription, you can now access Flex specifically by going on the Train Hard shop and purchasing the ebooks for either just a 6-week cycle or the full first training phase of the year. So highly recommend checking that out. Highly recommend getting on the Train Hard app. Let's get strong. Let's get big. Now let's go back to the podcast. Before we move on from this conversation, because Chris Williamson has read this letter on his podcast many times, and I think it's worth going into like this side of the conversation too, because I think that there's a lot of examples, and the Lance Armstrong example is the perfect example though, of like, can you raise someone that's truly destined for greatness? Like, does it take being too tough on someone to like, is that like one of the ingredients that needs to be in the recipe for some of these people that are just going to go out there and like dominate? And I think that goes back to this conversation of like, is that even worth it? Because are these people happy people? You know, like Lance Armstrong has been through a lot of like dark stuff because his obsession with winning over anything meant that he lied, meant that he cheated, meant that he hurt a lot of people. Like, he's admitted to not being proud of all this stuff, and how much of that is required to be as great of an athlete as he was, and B, like a result of having this upbringing of like, you're never going to be enough. And this letter, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but this letter was Winston Churchill, made it into some school and wrote a letter to his dad, like, you know, giving him the news, and was anxiously waiting to get a letter back. And dude, the letter, you can look it up, like Winston Churchill father letter is like, it starts with, you should be ashamed of your slovenly, happy-go-lucky, harem-scarum style of work. And he goes on to say how like,
This is his dad saying that, or
his dad. Yeah. His dad's letter back is basically this, like this whole thing about how you've never made me proud. You're like absolutely the worst. Don't think that I'm ever going to write you like these long letters going back. And then it's funny because at the end of the letter, he just says, your mother sends her love. So
you have failed to get into the 60th Rifles, the finest regiment in the Army. You have imposed on me an extra charge of some 200 pounds a year. I guess, obviously, like, yeah, he has to pay that, right? Because they're over in anyway,
do not think that I'm going to take the troubles of writing you long letters after every failure you commit and undergo. I no longer attach the slightest weight to anything you may say. Anyway, it's harsh, dude. Like, this is his dad responding to him getting into something that he was like proud of and excited to hear his dad like get back to it. And when Chris Williamson has brought this up on his podcast, and it's a good point, is like, how much of that is necessary for building the man that was, you know, is highly regarded as like one of the most important leaders in one of the most important conflicts in the world, right? And how much of it, you know, you don't get the Winston Churchill that maybe the world needed if you didn't have such a, quote unquote, to our conversation, like too tough of a father, right? Like if the father was,
that's brutal. That's brutal.
It's super brutal, but like, do you need that level of brutal to like have some of these people that are just exceptional? And then that turns around the question of like, do you really want to raise a child that's so quote unquote exceptional, but broken in many other ways? Like there's, I think there's a balance there, right?
Yeah, man. No, it's a great
crazy.
point.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a brutal letter, dude. I mean,
it's so bad. And the fact that it ends with your mother sends her love and then it's fucking, oh man. But anyway, I think that there's that side to this conversation too, that it is just interesting to think about, because I don't know, you've never, or at least I can't readily think of someone that's been like incredibly exceptional, super successful, that doesn't have something in their past that was just kind of like a trauma or something that just makes them like so fueled by something that isn't just like love, support, and encouragement.
I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of sports athletes I mean, there's plenty of business owners too that are probably, I mean, who knows? But yeah, you definitely hear of stories where they have like this conflict. And I think also going back to it, right? Like that's one of the reasons why we should train. I know this is like, obviously we're big advocates, but it's like, you know, you talk about, I don't know, Churchill. I mean, that's an extreme example of adversity, right? Where you're really proud of something and your dad basically crushes you. But how many other experiences did he have growing up where he had to overcome adversity, overcome struggle and challenges? And not everybody has necessarily like, I don't know, sports or family dynamics that make it that way. You have to expose yourself to it intentionally. And one way you could do that is in the gym, right? So you could, and it's not the same. I'm not comparing growing up in, you know, foster care with training in the gym. All I'm saying is that if it is something you could do to intentionally expose yourself to more adversity, because you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's levels to this.
Exactly.
But the matter of the fact is that like, if you're currently living your life to where you sleep on a perfectly comfortable mattress inside a climate controlled home, and then you eat exactly the food that you wanted to eat, and then you're in a climate controlled car and you drive to work and you're never bored because you're constantly listening to a podcast, or like, if you live the typical life of convenience that we have access to now because of all the developments, then to your point, like you never have even the slightest bit of challenge, adversity, discomfort that I think then makes it so impossible to deal with the things that aren't in your control, that are very uncomfortable, very hard, and you need to deal with. And that's why training is so important, because like, I'm not going to not have AC in my house or not use a car when I want to get somewhere. Like, all those areas of convenience just make sense, but I am going to train every day because there's value in purposefully putting myself in a position where like I am very uncomfortable right now. And that's the value, because otherwise we live in a time now where like discomfort doesn't find us unless it's really bad. Like we have to find it so that we're prepared for like the big things.
Yeah, man. I mean, today, so this morning I went and swam early this morning with Ava. She wanted to go swim. I was like, dude, that sounds great. And you and I have been talking about it on the podcast. So I'm like, I was like,
Where'd you go?
I went to like a local pool.
Okay.
Like not like nothing. I didn't go to a university or anything, but I went to like a local pool, and Ava, I just, man, it felt good, man. I found some goggles in the lost and found, and bro, I just, I may or may not have borrowed them, but yeah, man, I was hitting, I think it was 25 out, 25 back. That's like a typical like neighborhood pool or whatever.
Yeah.
I was hitting 50s. I was doing them. I did 50s on the 90 seconds. So each one took me like 50 seconds. I wasn't going crazy fast, right? And I would just give myself like 30, 45 seconds, boom, 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 intervals. And anyways, it was great, man. And then, but to your point about discomfort, I'm going to the sheriff's department today, and we're going to go work on some of the long range stuff. And they are creating a course for me to mimic the tactical games. And so it's pretty cool because they're going to mimic some of that same stuff, but I don't know what to expect. And so it's a nice kind of challenge, right? Mentally, physically, to say, hey, I have no idea what I'm getting myself into. Let's go see how we do. So I'm fired up for that. I'll have to let you know how it goes.
Dude, on that note, so this is coming out. The
SAND program, is that it?
No. We'll get to that. The Tim Kennedy and Jason Khalipa, the Versus YouTube video has been out. So if you haven't watched it yet, we'll put the link in the show notes. You have to go back. You have to watch that video. It is super entertaining. I'm not going to spoil like who wins, but it's awesome at the end, regardless of who wins. But you went against Tim Kennedy. So there were three challenges. There was fitness, grappling, and shooting. And I kind of want to hear your like your experience going through that stuff and like how you feel like you perform versus like how you're expecting to perform. I want to get the debrief now that the video's out, and hopefully most people listening have watched it. If not, I would definitely pause the podcast, go watch it, come back so you can get the behind the scenes.
Well, yeah, because we don't want to give it away, or are we going to give it away?
Well, spoilers incoming. Let's just like we'll let people know. So if you're like, haven't had a chance to watch it yet, like hit pause, go watch it. But yeah, I want to talk about it.
Yeah, so hit pause because a spoiler alert, it's not going to, make it as fun, but no, that was a great video. I've seen a couple of at the point of this recording, we've seen almost the final version of it. And what's cool about it is that if you go back on the day it's released, we actually had a workout that comes up on our Force Track on the Train Hard app, where you could test the same workout that we did, which was a 2K row into max hang power cleans on a 10-minute running clock. And Tim Kennedy is a Green Beret. He's a sniper. He's a former UFC fighter. He's a husband. He's a father. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He basically represents all things that I believe are like he represents the guy to me, like the guy that I've spent a lot of time with him and watching the way that he talks to people, the compassion that he has, not only for his kids, his family, but also other people, but to also know that he could literally just destroy you at any given minute is something really powerful. And it was an honor to battle with him. I want to do it again. So we started off, we did a fitness competition, which you'll see in the video, 2K row, max hang cleans. We tried to identify a weight that was appropriate just because he doesn't lift heavy loads as often. So we did 135. I ended up winning that event by 10 reps or so, give or take. I got off the rower in right underneath 7 minutes. And then I had, give or take, 3 minutes on the hang cleans. I think I got 46 of them. So if you want to go do that workout, go hit it. So that was a win. Felt good.
I haven't done the workout yet. I 100% plan to. The fact that you rode a 2K under 7 minutes, what looked like pretty casually, what kind of effort were you putting out? Were you trying to okay, definitely have some gas in the tank or were you trying to give yourself as much time as possible?
Yeah. Part of it too, I did not push myself super hard on that for two reasons. One is I wanted to get to the bar and feel pretty fresh. The other is I knew the fitness was going to be in my favor for sure. And so I wanted to make sure I want it to be a good battle, man. I wanted us to get on the barbell and battle it out hard. So
Yeah.
but anyways, I took it pretty good, right? I'm a pretty strong rower, so that's helpful. Obviously, those two movements are both two that like definitely favor me, which was nice. So I come off that, I'm feeling pretty good, but that was pretty consistent with the way I thought I would be able to perform. And then we go to the grappling, dude, and I just I think we talked about this on the podcast. Like I personally felt like I got embarrassed. And I have to kind of like recalibrate how I felt about that experience because there's just so many different levels to it. But to have George St. Pierre there as the referee and to get my ass kicked and get tapped 5 times in 10 minutes was just really embarrassing for me. And the best way to think about it, my coach at jiu-jitsu explained it like this to me, and it made me feel better. He's like, if you have white to black belt, and there's a significant difference between a white belt and a black belt. We all could see it just from like afar. Even within the black belt rank, if you took all black belts and you put them in a gym, you would see the difference in their abilities between a white belt and a black belt within the black belt. He's like, that's how big of a discrepancy there are between the pros and the not pros. And I happen to be grappling with one of the top grapplers in the world. And it just, yeah, man, I got slammed in the wall. I got my ass handed to me. And I really was trying. Like I was trying as hard as I could, and he just did what he wanted.
So watching the video as an outsider that doesn't like, I mean, I understand obviously the point of grappling, but I don't know like the intricacies. I don't know like, oh, he countered this that way, or this is a good position, that's a bad position. But honestly, looking at it, it didn't look like he was just manhandling you. I mean, obviously, it was like, I think he got the 5 pins in like 6 minutes, or the 5,
It was like 8 minutes. Yeah. Something like that.
So it like he did it maybe easier than even I expected. But in terms of like what I was watching, like, I mean, it looked like he was fucking working for it. Like
he was working for it, but he just, dude, we brought this up on the podcast a couple of weeks ago about like people's, like, they think they could do something when it's actually tested.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
people think that they could do something to Tim. You can't do, no, you can't. Like, what's that saying? Like, Conor McGregor, you ain't going to do nothing, or whatever it is. Like, you can't do anything. I tried as hard as I physically could, and he was able to get my arms over my head and just do what he wanted. And it's super aggravating as a guy who like normally has that capability across many of people. Like, that's the hardest part, is like, you go to most gyms most of the time, you're good. But with certain people, it's like it's like you're in kindergarten.
So let me ask you, and I'm trying to like word this question correctly. So obviously you're super strong, and arguably stronger than Tim.
Yeah.
And well conditioned, and it was just 10 minutes. So like that, you can kind of throw that out the window. But what's happening when you're like, okay, I don't want to be put in this position, and he just puts you into that position? Is it the fact that he like has so much just experience that he like knows exactly what you're going to try and do and is already countering what you're doing? Or like, what is he doing so much better? Like, what's going on mentally? Like, what's he thinking about that you're just not able to process that makes it such different levels?
He's inflicting like his will onto me, meaning like he was slamming me into the wall, and he knows that I don't have as much experience in the wall. He has a lot of experience. He's very good at it. So he's getting me off my game already from the get-go by double legging me into a wall, right? And so I'm already pinned up against the wall. It's an uncomfortable position. I'm not quite sure what to do from there. And then he's saying to himself, okay, where do I want to go? Well, typically, like with a guy like me, you want to try and like negate my hips. You want to basically take my strength away from me. And so he knows strategically, if you have a bigger, stronger guy, what am I going to do to shut him down? And that's where he went to. He went to positions where I could not use my strength. I could not use my conditioning, because he knew how to navigate through that. And, like once you get your arms up here and I can no longer shrimp out or whatever, like he just shut down my positions.
It's fascinating. It's honestly really, really interesting to like, there you go.
That's a good picture. That's not me, for the record, but it just goes to show when you have a skill set that's been created over many, many years and decades, You know, you could impart what you want on the other individual and there's nothing they could do about it. Nothing. Like, and I'm coming from a background being doing jiu-jitsu for 8 years. And cause he's a big enough guy where he can muscle you for sure. Yeah. Anyways, if people watch the video and they're like, oh, wow, like Jason got worked. Yeah, I did, but I fucking tried as hard as I can. And there's just levels to the game. You should go try and roll with him and see what happens,
All right. But let's get to the spoiler of all spoilers. So you guys are tied. You do the fitness thing. You win, kind of expected. You do the grappling thing. Tim wins, kind of expected. So it's a best of 3. The last thing is at the range. And I was super interested and like, obviously like, immersed in this at this point, because like, this is the tiebreaker. And I think the most interesting part is like, dude, the guy's special forces. Like, it's not like the fitness thing was almost like, okay, that's your thing. Obviously he works out, but it's your thing. The grappling thing, like obviously you grapple, but it's his thing. I would have said going into it that I thought that they were even going to give you some sort of handicap for the shooting, because shooting is like, I thought
I was going to get a handicap. I was trying to convince him that he needed to use a revolver or shoot left-handed.
So I'm going into this like expecting this, like this kind of isn't fair. Like, he spent his life, and again, I don't want to take anything away from Tim. Tim is an absolute freak, but I do think that you like really stepped up to the plate and did very, very well. I think he was surprised. I think you were surprised.
I was surprised
by how that course went. So talk me through kind of what went through running that course as flawlessly as it looked on the video, because you went first. So that was also kind of tricky, because I was like, all right.
Well, the way the video is edited is a little bit weird. Like, okay, we could talk about it here, but like we each had 3 runs. Is like what actually happened. He went first, I went second. So I'll just talk you through it. So we show up there, we're at Staccato Ranch, and I'm using a Staccato XC, which is a badass pistol. I go talk to the range master, who is like today's modern day G.I. Joe. I mean, this dude is legit. I think I sent Liz a picture of, or maybe you and Liz, I don't know if I did, but he had his cigar in his mouth, and he's just like, he was like a U.S. Marshal. And dude, this guy was great. So he's talking me through the event, and he's explaining to me how it works. I wasn't familiar with it. I had never done anything like it, where it's a run and gun course, but you could only shoot targets within a certain like orange or white box. So if you're in an orange box, you can shoot orange. If you're in a white box, you can shoot white. I had never done that before. So you start on a golf cart, and you take down 2 targets, and then you sprint, take down more targets, sprint. You have to do magazine changes throughout, because you're shooting more than the magazine capacity, and you finish it off with a plate tree at the end. That's just like epic, So we start off, and I'm having this guy give me lessons. So for maybe like 20 minutes, and I'm self-visualizing what I want to do. Right. So I'm dry firing, I'm visualizing, I'm thinking about where I'm going to do my mag drops at. Like I'm really trying to like zone in. And then, Tim's doing his thing. First one goes, Tim puts up a pretty good time. He had a few misses, but it was good. But I watched it and I was like, okay, like, I think I could do that. I think I can. But then I figured he was probably going like 80%, right? I thought that like, all right, shit, he's going to really ramp it up. So I went, and he beat me by maybe, I don't know, 2 seconds. So I'm thinking to myself, all right, my next round, if I really, step up to the plate, I can maybe see something. So he goes his next round. And if I'm not mistaken, he puts up like a very similar time. And I'm like, oh, because I was expecting it to be significantly left, just based on the, the experience. So I'm like, all right. And so, dude, I don't know what happened, man. I got in the zone. I don't know, say whatever it was, but boom, 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 boom. I had 2 misses the whole time. Drop mags, fast mags, plate tree, blah, blah. And I ended up getting it by 2 seconds. So I ended up having the fastest time. And so then it goes to Tim, and Tim has to beat it. And I took the W on that one. I was honestly shocked. I was just shocked because, I had been doing some training for like the last year or 2 with a pistol. And it is definitely different than what he was used to, right? Like, I think if we had a rifle, it would have been a completely different situation. Like, because you got to figure, especially as a Green Beret, like I don't know how much they train with a pistol versus a rifle. I think with a rifle, it would have been a clear advantage for him. But maybe because I'd been working some pistol, I don't know. But Yeah, dude, I was stoked. I was stoked on that one.
How much did the sprinting in between shoots play into it? Like, was your heart rate like pretty elevated to the fact where you were like really thinking about like getting your breathing down, or was it kind of like you're fit enough that it was kind of like a non-factor? Like you were moving quick from place to place, but it's not like you.
Yeah, I mean, I put up a video on social media. If you go back on my Instagram a while ago, it actually has a my
Yeah.
winning event where I had the camera on my hat, and you could hear my breathing. I would say that it was pretty controlled. That just, it's a 50-second effort, so it's not like it's about controlling your breath. But yeah, I don't think that the running really made too big of a difference.
Okay.
I would say that going into it, I was expecting that the shooting would be like a big difference. But I think what I failed to think about too is the type of weapon system that most of these guys use. I mean, I could be wrong, but I think most, especially like special forces guys, I imagine most of the time they're using their rifle, because if they have to get to their pistol, like something really bad already happened.
Right. Well, dude, it was fun to watch. It was fun to see you take the W. It was fun to see it come down to the shooting and you kind of rise to the occasion. So let me ask you, what does this do for your confidence going into the tactical game? So when this comes out, it's just over a month until you compete at your first tactical games in Utah. And that has a long gun, like a rifle component. And it's not just going to be running from point A to point B. There's going to be more fitness elements, which I think plays to your strength, but also is going to make it harder, because then breathing is going to be a factor. Like actually getting everything under control is going to be a factor. Are you feeling, I mean, maybe this is a dumb question, but are you feeling better after your performance there? Are you going in with any expectations? Are you like, dude, if I'm doing this, like I'm trying to podium? Are you like just going to participate and have fun, which I don't think exists with you? Like, where's your kind of head at?
Because I started training for this so long ago, and then I had to postpone. I think my mindset is like, I want to perform well. Like I think
What does perform well mean?
I
Do you have
mean,
any kind of like podium or bust, top 10 or but, like, have you like looked into like
I would need
what
to
it,
look at how many guys are competing. But I'd like to be in the top 10%. So that's probably like a podium spot, right? I feel like I'm earning that confidence on a regular basis. My pistol is fine. I'm not focusing on that as much right now. I'm focusing mainly on rifle. I have not touched a rope or certain things in a while, so I might go expose myself to that. But I mean, those will come back, just like riding a bike, climbing a rope or whatever. But I would be disappointed at the tactical games if I don't, finish in the top, I'd say 10%. So we have to look at how many guys there are.
and do you know yet like who of like the names that we would recognize are going to be at this? Like, is Jacob Hebner going to be there? Matt Chan going to be there?
No, I should look it up though. No, I don't know. I think for me right now,
We should get them on the podcast before the tactical games and talk shit.
yeah,
I think what we should do.
Yeah, we should talk shit. I mean, it's all good. It's all good. The reality is, like, the longer, the older I get, the more I realize, like, I don't think I'm very competitive, but I am pretty competitive. I think I'm pretty competitive when it comes to stuff like this, because I want to do well. So I'm putting in the work to make sure that when I show up there, I know what I'm doing. It's really important to me. I want people to be able to watch me and be like, dude, that guy, he doesn't look like a liability, right? And he looks like he's been training. Like, that's what I want. I want someone to say that.
Dude, I'm hoping competitive Jason shows up when we do this High Rocks together, and you're not, slowing me down on those runs, dude.
Well, it's the same thing that happens there. Dude, so I was staying with the kids at a hotel, and I was getting in a 5-mile run, right? And so I'm using this is like a what brand? I'm using this G-Shock watch, right? And so I'm out and I'm running, and I got like 4.8 miles or something like that. And I had told myself that I wanted to get 5 miles. Like, I had already made the commitment before I started, but I was in an area I wasn't very familiar with. And so I just ran around the hotel parking lot until I got to 5 miles. And the kids come out and they're like, what the hell are you doing? And I was like, it's cool, guys. Just give me 5 more minutes, and I'm running around the parking lot. So I wanted to make sure I got in my miles, man.
I would do the same thing. So I resonate with that. But no, let's talk about, so this is coming out Monday, the 29th, which means tomorrow, depending on when you listen to this, but the day after this drops. So you have tactical games coming up in just over a month.
Yep.
There's going to be sandbag elements to the fitness of that event.
everywhere. Yeah.
Like there just is. It's probably they do some barbell stuff. I've seen some barbell stuff included. I think they do some dumbbell stuff, but they love the sandbag. They love the odd object. So how are you going to implement sand into your training for the tactical games? And then we let the cat out of the bag because Kelly was so excited about sand. But
Yeah.
then
Right.
let's talk a little bit about the sand program that we're going to make available on the Train Hard app and how that's going to tie into how you're preparing for this.
Yeah. I mean, so we are rolling out a 10-week sand program, and I'm excited about the workouts. They're 4 a week for 10 weeks, so 40 total workouts. And for me, I've been testing a lot of these. So if you guys have seen on social media, I've been using an 80-pound. It's a GoRuck 2.0. And the reason why we went with the GoRuck 2.0, and we put a lot of thought into this, there's a ton of great sandbags available. And some of them are like the round ones, like med balls. Some are like the Tombstone. Some are these other brand. There's all kinds of different sandbags. The reason I went with this one is because it had a multi-grip component. And so you could have a vertical grip, a horizontal grip. You could have an outdoor grip. You could have it for, putting on your back. So, and 80 pounds is a good weight where it's heavy enough that like if you're carrying it, it sucks. If you're holding it in like a front rack, it sucks, but you could still put it over your head. Any heavier than 80, it just got too much. So that's the plan. It's an 80-pound sandbag. It's going to be incorporating deadlifts, hang cleans, shoulder over head, thrusters. And Gabe and I actually, we recorded a bunch of videos to help put out some of these on how to do them. But I'm fired up. That's what I'm going to train. I'm going to train with that. And then I'm going to train obviously on the range for the next 4 weeks.
Dude, I love it, man. I've mentioned the sandbag here in the past and just how it was such a big piece in me getting back into training after hurting my back. I think that taught me just the beauty of everything that you need to strengthen that is much easier to strengthen with like the awkwardness and the odd objectness of a sandbag. Like there's just so much that you don't necessarily have to engage when you're using a barbell. Dumbbells are a little bit better, but sand is just like the ultimate expression of like, because it's so awkward, because it's a little unstable, because it's not going to be super evenly distributed. Like you just have to like embrace your core in ways that you don't realize. You have to move with a certain intentionality, and it's just like gritty, dude. Like the workouts are awesome. Like it's a really good way. We talk about getting uncomfortable with your training. Like this, I think, is a nice level of that. And also it's just so accessible. Like I understand that me and you are super fortunate. We have like really nice garage setups that, we've invested a lot into, and we have access to a lot of toys. And I love that. But I think for a lot of people that are trying to get started, maybe not ready to go to like a full-on gym or get the whole setup, to be able to follow a program that literally all you need is like somewhere to run and a sandbag. And to fill up the sandbag, like I know this when I buy exercise equipment, like the shipping is like half the cost.
Huge. Yeah.
So you can buy a sandbag, not have to pay enormous amounts of shipping because you're trying to ship 100 pounds around the country. And then, you either go to Home Depot and get really cheap sand, or there's even places to get sand for free. So I love how accessible it is. I love how versatile it is. I love the different feel of training and the grittiness of it. So yeah, man, I'm excited. I hope people check it out tomorrow. We have the gear as well on the shop. So you can get everything, one-stop shop. You can get the sandbag 2.0. You can get the program for it. If you get the sandbag, you get a sample of sand workouts anyway, just to kind of get started. And then if you want to down the line buy the 10-week program, great. If you want to start with the whole thing, also great. But this is one of the things that I've been most excited about getting out the door, and I'm super excited that the date is here. So yeah.
And if you're a Train Hard app subscriber, it's going to pop up.
It's going to pop up in the app. That's right.
Yep.
That's right.
So you get it complimentary as part of being and I just want to make sure we're noting this effectively. Like this has been something I've been talking about for like years. I've been talking about sand, particularly on the side of the mats for jiu-jitsu. Now, Gabe and I, we kind of evolved it in terms of the tactical training and being able to do this in the garage. It's not necessarily just designed for a jiu-jitsu gym, but if you are a jiu-jitsu practitioner, this is a good option to have at a jiu-jitsu gym to get in some type of strength conditioning before or after you roll. So that's a option. And then, dude, like you said, man, it's super accessible. It's affordable. If you are going to fill it up with sand that you like find for, sandbags for weather, just be aware of filling it up with wet sand. I'd probably recommend finding dry sand. If you could spend the extra $10, because it's like normally $5 every 50 pounds or 60-pound bag, I'd recommend just going to a hardware store and just getting like their cheapest sand possible. Just because whatever you fill it with, you don't want to fill with something super wet. It could just it's much easier to pour it also from a bag than it is to use a shovel and try and stuff it in there. So pro tip there.
Yeah. And man, dude, I'm looking at the programming right now. I have it pulled up on my screen. Like every week you get some mix of like mixed motor training, long conditioning. There's intervals. Some are sprint intervals. Some are building intervals. Some are going to be strength plus Metcon. So more conventional kind of approach, similar to the Force program that we have on the app. So again, we've talked about it a lot. You can get the 2-week sample. You can get the sandbag. You can buy it all on the shop. But I'm super fired up about this, man.
Dude, yeah. It's going to be gritty. It's going to be one of those things too. Like if you guys end up getting, if you get the sandbag, you might not use this every day for the rest of your life. That's fine. But it'll have a place in your training where maybe every now and then you just want to grab it and just do something gnarly. You want to take it with you on a road trip, empty it out, take it with you to the beach, fill it up when you're there. That's the way I do it. Like I'm headed on a trip. My wife and I are celebrating our 15-year wedding anniversary. And I'm going to bring a GoRuck backpack. I'm going to stuff a sandbag inside of it. I'm going to fill it up on the beach. I'm going to use that to train with. Like, that's just a normal part of my travel and lifestyle. And it's something you guys could do too. So yeah, man, it's all good.
Yeah, I'm fired up, man. Speaking of training, so I actually ended up getting a coach for marathon training. So and here's the reason why, dude. Like I have a really ambitious goal. So the time goal that I have.
Who's your coach?
It's just someone that like came highly recommended from like the endurance. Like I wanted someone that like understands running. And also I think it's going to be a great shortcut for me to kind of like understand that type of training because I can ask him a bunch of questions too. And I think, dude, like there's a reason that we have programming. Yeah. Like we offer programming because A, there's an accountability component there, and B, like you're going to be better off than trying to figure out like, hey, I want to build muscle. Like, how do I do that? Should I go bench? Should I go do this? Follow flex. Like we have it figured out. You do that. And I think that this just made a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. Also, the accountability of one thing I've done in the past wrong with running. And like you could appreciate this having worked with Hinshaw in the past is like, you can't just go out and run hard every single time. And that's something that I wouldn't do a good job of on my own.
Right.
Like for me, it'll constantly want to be like, well, I did 5 miles in this time last week. Like now I want to do it in like a little bit less time. And really to be successful in the marathon distance, the 80-20 rule is like the thing that everyone talks about, right? Like 80% of your running should be easy, slow, aerobic work. And I need more accountability, not accountability on like, hey, go hard every single day, but more accountability on like, hey, you should be going no faster than X pace for these easy runs. Otherwise, you're going to burn the candle on both ends and you're not even going to get the aerobic benefit that you should be getting. So it's just nice to have someone that I can bounce ideas off of and have some actual structure building into it. But the thing that I wanted to share, because I know a lot of people are, and we're going to have something like actually official for this coming very soon. But what I'm doing now is I'm doing 4 days of flex and 4 days of running. And there are some days that it's a little bit of both. Right. And I've just like significantly cut back on the lower body volume because that ends up to be a lot. So upper body, I'm still doing kind of the full sessions, but on lower body days, what I'll do is I'll just skip the functional strength piece and just do the bodybuilding stuff and do the lower end of the sets. So if I prescribe 3 to 4 sets or 2 to 3 sets, I'm always doing the 3 or always doing the 2. And so far that's been working really well. I'm sure that that'll have to change a little bit more as I get into like heavier mileage weeks. Right now I'm running like 30, 35 miles a week, which is a decent amount, but usually when you're training for a marathon, like you get to 50, 55 mile weeks. And then I'll probably have to do less.
Cause that's in January. So your marathon's in January and then we're doing the High Rocks in November.
That's right.
Okay. So High Rocks we're doing in Dallas in November, and I am going to be adding more and more running to my training, which dude, the running's hard, man. Like dude, my legs, dude, they're not supple like they used to be, man. I think, dude, it's just like, bro, I know. Yeah, but I think it just is a good testament. I'm glad you found a coach. Actually, at first, when you first said that, I kind of was going to make fun of you, but now that I'm thinking about it, like you're kind of putting your money where your mouth is. Like if you believe that the value we're providing through our SAM program, Force, Flex, whatever, is necessary for people, well, then if you had a specific goal, why wouldn't you reach out to a coach that can help with programming? Like, it just makes total sense to me. So I'm glad you're doing that, man. Let me know how I could support. And dude, I've loved getting the messages from people saying that they're going to be out in Dallas for the High Rocks. Also keep in mind, this is dropping right before the CrossFit Games?
Right before the games. Yeah. Yeah.
So at the CrossFit Games, we'll be hosting on that Friday and Sunday some men's club workouts. We're also going to be, just offsite. So if you want to come visit us at the CrossFit Games in Fort Worth, Texas, we will be there. Where's the best place for them to go to find that information, Gabe?
So we're going to have a page that'll be ready by the time this comes out. So look out for the page in the show notes that has the full schedule of where we're going to be and when. You can drop your email in there if you want to have like up to date updates, because I'm sure that like something might come up like, hey, there's going to be a great chance to do a workout here or be here, or, the games tends to have a lot of opportunities to do cool stuff, but that you don't know of until you're there. So it'll be good to obviously follow on social. I'm sure Jason will be updating kind of where he is, come meet me here, but put your email into that landing page and I'll make sure that we're emailing out updates as we have them. But yeah, so far we're definitely doing Train Hard Men's Club Friday morning and Sunday morning at 7 a.m. And then there's going to be the open mat BJJ stuff at the Go Ruck watch party. And that's going to be Saturday and Sunday, I believe at noon, like 10 to noon, but they're still finalizing those times. So yeah, just check out the landing page and it should be there.
Yeah. Well, we're going to be getting after some jiu-jitsu. We're going to be doing some men's club meetups. We'll see you guys in Fort Worth if you're out there. And as per usual, we just really appreciate you guys for taking time, listening to this podcast, listening to Gabe and I riff on different things about life. In particular, starting off with that tough conversation. I think that was really good. It's a good thing for me to continue to reflect on. And go back, check out the other episodes. We have amazing, incredible guests. The Chris Hinshaw one. We have Kelly Starrett. We have Bear Hanlon. I mean, dude, we have so many awesome guests. So make sure to check out the previous episodes. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. And as always, keep training hard.